evening, Sivananda. What a pleasure and joy to be here. I would like to extend my gratitude to the Swamis for allowing me to come and speak here today. It is such a deep honor. I have so much respect for the lineage that you uphold and carry forward for all of the masses. So this evening, I've come here to talk about creativity, unlocking creativity. When we do so, it's a tool that helps us connect more deeply with the divine within. So before I get into my talk, I'm going to open up this talk with a song by my friend Paul Leftenegger. He's an international musician. You'll often find him opening up for many great spiritual teachers. His music inspires love and compassion. He is one of the most genuine souls I've ever met. And when I listen to his music, it sends me deeply into my heart. So I invite you this evening, as you listen to this little music piece, and there's purpose for this, but as you listen to this music piece, I invite you to come into that beautiful heart space. If you notice that your mind starts to move into some thoughts and you begin thinking, just move back into that presence of love in the center of your heart. And if you feel so inclined, as we play the music, just put your hand on your heart and close your eyes.
God is listening to you. The angels are listening to you too. I am listening to you. The universe is listening to you. To listen is to love. To listen is to care. To listen is to share. You know life really loves you. So open up your heart and share the vibration of you. Ask for help and ask for support and ask for grace and be sure to ask for strength. You don't have to do this all alone anymore. You don't have to be afraid. You see, the Lord is with you, beaming through your heart. So open up your heart and ask for what you need. Archangel Michael, Archangel Raphael, Archangel Gabriel, Archangel Uriel, Sandalphon Saint Bernadette, and Christ's holy love lives inside your sacred heart. Oh, Holy Mother, Holy Father, creation dwells within.
Just slowly open your eyes. Is everybody sitting in that beautiful heart center? Right now, you're sitting in the lap of creation. You're sitting in the lap of creativity. Let me explain how and why. So I've been creative all my life. So growing up, I had the most incredible parents. My mother was full of love, and my father was an absolute creative genius. It was the perfect breeding ground for me to become a creative person. So my earliest memories were of my childhood and spending time with my deaf grandmother. When I was a little boy, I would go and I'd spend the weekend at her house. And I was curious. I was very curious. What was her experience? Because she couldn't hear, and I could, but I wanted to know what she was experiencing. So I would quite often, I would watch TV with no sound with her, just to experience that. We would play cards and we'd write notes back and forth, but we'd stop writing notes, but the communication continued to roll on. So this was sort of my first introduction to the silence. Now that's an intricate part of what I'm going to speak about tonight. So my grandmother at a very young age invoked this tide of silence in me that I would later lean back into. Now in my early adulthood, I became very angry and disgruntled, and I felt so incredibly lost. But then I found art. I found tattoo art, and I thought, well, this will suit me. It'd be tough enough and cool enough to serve my purpose. But as I started to create my art, it was softening me. It was sort of waking me up. And those memories of my grandma, the silence, started coming back. While I was creating, I would go into this deep place of silence, and the work would just overcome me. So that was sort of the start of my journey, and the reason why I'm here to talk about creativity with you. In 2018, I wrote my first book, Be Love, a book about awakening. It was an incredible experience for me. I always knew I was going to write a book. What I didn't know is that I was going to carry on and write 5 more. So after I started writing books, it further and deepened my awakening, and I got more and more curious about creativity. I felt like I was just tapping the edges of what creativity is. So what is creativity? And where does it come from? Most simply stated, it's just a spark that just suddenly arises. Or another thing about creativity is that you can call forward that spark, and we can start to invoke that spark all on our own. But I found some of my most interesting creations, the most interesting sparks that have come to me have been spontaneous. They just arose. So creativity comes from within. And the source of creativity is God. I feel like there's only one creator, and that is God itself. And we tap into creativity through God, and it brings it to and through us. So we can't have creativity without creation. We start with creativity, and then it naturally moves us into creation. So creations are the movement of that spark that has come. Now, is there anybody out here that's not creative? Now, I hear this a lot. People will come up to me and profess that, well, I don't have a creative bone in my body. Is there anyone that feels that way? Just put your hands up. Oh my goodness. I am in creative heaven. Not a single hand. That's great. I didn't want to have to ask the Swamis to remove anybody. Well, that's fantastic. Creativity is not just for the chosen few. It's found in everybody. We're all creative. But when I think about creativity, often people think it's just for artists. The artists are creative, musicians are creative, and people that write, they're creative. And I hear a lot people say to me, "Oh, I'm not creative." I'm glad you guys aren't. Thank goodness. But I think it's important to understand that creativity spans much further than putting a pencil to paper or creating music or writing books. Creativity goes so much deeper than that. The way we dress is creative. The way we live our lives is creative. The way we interact with other people is creative. So creativity, when you look at it and you start to unpack what is creative, I can't find much in life that's not creative. What we say is a creation that sets forward a thing into motion. What we think, what we feel, they're all creations. No, and I think the biggest creation that we'll ever make is the creation of our life. So creation is a movement of that spark, and it's the expression of the divine that comes through us. So when I was writing my book, Be Love, one evening I was sitting away and just plumping away at the keys. And while I was writing, I meandered into the topic of creation. And I started writing, and all this stuff started flowing out of me. And I'm like, I didn't quite understand what was coming, but as fast as my hands could type, I was moving. The words were flying out of me. And I said, while I was writing, that creation comes to us fully formed. And that when that spark arises, it's not the beginning of creation, it's rather the end of creation. Now that's confusing to me, because my ideas, I get an idea, then I get to doing, I create a thing. The idea is not the beginning, but as I'm writing, this information is coming out. It's like the spark or the idea is the end of creation, because everything we need has already been worked out in the ethers, in the non-physical. Everything has conspired, moved into place, so that the object that has come to us can move through us. And we're just that last 1% of creation. 99% of creation has already done all the work for us. So after I wrote this, I'm sort of feeling delusional and crazy, because I never heard this before. This wasn't a concept out of my mind, it just arose out of creation. So I thought, there's no way I can qualify this. There's no way that I can validate what I'm saying here. So how can I leave this in the book? People are going to think I've just completely lost it. So I decided to take a break, push away the laptop, and put on the Gaia Network. And I was watching a series, an 8-part series on yoga. So where I had every day, I would spend 20, 30 minutes up to an hour watching this program, and I'd pause it and then come back the next day. So when I flipped on Gaia, hit play, this little Indian man pops on the screen, and I'm going to butcher this word, okay? You guys have taken a vow of ahimsa, nonviolence? Okay. So this little Indian guy comes on the screen and he says, Haran Yagurba. How did I do? Haran Yagurba. Okay. I'll never be able to say that. So this little Indian guy comes on and he says, I'm not going to repeat it. I don't want to push my luck. And he says, he goes on to say, it's the cosmic egg, it's the source of creation. And everything comes to us fully formed. And we are the end of an idea is an end of creation, not the beginning. Now, when I went to look this up, I couldn't find any reference other than what this little Indian guy said on the screen. So I'd love to, pick your guys' brains about that. But it was such divine timing that everything that I just wrote, this little Indian guy comes on the screen and he says that. So that sort of set my mind into a different area of creation. I felt like, there's so many more layers to creation. And, that I was just scratching the surface on this topic. And I think that I'll spend the rest of my life digging at this topic. So what is our role with creation? And how do we express creation? So with what I've discovered in creation is that my biggest role, because creation's coming to us fully formed, and I don't have to sort of figure everything out, that I need to be a participant in creation. Now, I've noticed this when I'm working on my clients. I'll be working away, and it just feels like I'm a participant. That it's not me that is doing this creation. Rather, it's doing me. I'm participating in this thing that is coming forward to and through me. Now, I think it's important, when I think about creativity, you can interchange that word creativity with intuition. You can interchange that word with the knowingness of your heart, or the voice of the silence that speaks to you. Okay, so this is a whole different way to think about creativity. Because creativity, to me, is just, at times, it's information. It's direction in my life. It's telling me, or it's guiding me, what to do from one moment to the next. And my role in creation is to just be a participant. So we don't possess creativity, it possesses us. And we don't force our creations. I remember when I first started tattooing, I was scared. I was very nervous. I'm going to hurt somebody and I'm going to do something that's permanent. And I'd be squeezing my tube that I was hanging on to so hard, thinking I'm just going to squish this design right out of the end of this tube. And what I needed to do was I needed to learn how to relax and allow it to flow through me. So when I think about creativity, I think of that when I realize that I'm not the source of creativity, and it's not going to come from me. I realize it's kind of like hydrolines. When a hydroline is not the source of power, but rather a means to transfer power from one place to the other. So when it comes to creativity, creation, we're not the source of that, but we're a means to transfer it into this world. And how do we access that creative forces that arise in us? And this is something that I'm going to go deeply into tomorrow during the workshop. How we access those forces, there's several things that we need to look at. First, creation comes from within, not the mind. So we must set down our mind and become quiet so we open up this space for creativity and for creation to move through. And that's sort of been the hardest part of the initial part of my journey with life, not just creating art, but with life, learning how to quiet this mind down. Because the mind thinks that it always knows what to do. But the mind pales in comparison to the wisdom that naturally arises within. And the thing about the wisdom that arises within us is the voice of the heart, the voice that speaks out of the silence, is so many decibels lower than the voice that's talking in our head. So that voice in your head is like an obnoxious guest that's interrupting this beautiful dialogue that's ever present in the silence in you. And to really go into our ability to create, not just to create a thing, but to create our lives and to become a vehicle for creation to move through, we need to learn how to quiet that mind down. By quieting the mind down, we create an environment that's more conducive to creation. And that environment sort of opens us up and makes us a more viable channel for creation to continuously flow and move through. So again, I think it's important that we learn how to sit quietly. And out of that quietness, we will hear creation. We'll know what words to speak when we meet somebody. That creative aspect or our intuition, our heart will say, it's time to be quiet. It's time to speak. And you'll just know what to say, what to do. Another aspect of moving more deeply into our creativity and moving creation is to understand that creation has its own intelligence built right into it. So we need to learn how to trust, because creativity and creation knows exactly what to do. I remember one time I had received a message that there was a chief up north, a native chief, that wanted to give me an eagle feather. For what reason, to this day, I still don't know. And I was supposed to come to this powwow to receive this eagle feather, and it was a real great honor. I was just humbled and blown away. So at the time, I was a big brother through the Big Brothers and Big Sisters agency, and I asked my little brother, I said, do you want to go on a road trip? And he's like, yeah. So I said, well, you want to go to a powwow? He's like, oh yeah. He was very keen on that. So we drive 3.5 hours up north. I live in southern Ontario. And we go to this powwow. I received the feather. We had a beautiful day. We ate all kinds of interesting food. And I figured, okay, that was wonderful. Now it's time to go home. It's another 3.5 hours to get home. So we get out to the main road If I go right, it takes me further up north. There's no roads to circle back. But if I go left, I go home. So logic says go left. I get to the corner, and my intuition, my heart, creativity rises up in me and it says go right. That doesn't work with my logic. I can't get home if I go right. So I pull the car off to the side of the road and I say to my little brother, I said, look, we got a bit of a problem here. My heart says, I got to go right. That's not going to take us home. I said, so I'm going to give you the responsibility of this decision. Do you want to go right or do you want to go left? Have you had enough adventure today? Or is it time to go? We just go left and we'll go home. But if you want some more adventure, let's go right. And he says, let's go right, let's go right. So I'm like, okay, great. Well, I'm glad he said that. I really wanted to go right. And I was being told to do that. So I told him, I said, okay, so we're on an adventure. And you have to keep your eyes open. You have to be very present to see why my heart says go right. He says, okay. I said, if you see something and you think that we should stop the car and get out, then you just say so. So we made a few stops, hit a store, hit a market. We're wandering around and I'm looking at him. What do you think, buddy? He's like, no, not here. I think he just wanted to keep going. So we get about 25 minutes up the road and I'm like, wow, we're getting up there now. And I see this paintings by Paul Duff. Paul Duff is a famous Canadian painter. He's passed on now, but he painted with the group of 7, apparently, I heard. I'd always wanted to stop in and see his gallery. So me and my little brother, I said, this is it. This is it. This is where we're going. So I wheel the car in there, and Paul's just closing the gallery for the day. And I get out of the car and I said, oh, are you closed? And he says, yeah, closed for the day. But he's like, come on in. I'll give you guys a tour. So Paul takes us through his art gallery. And the first paintings, don't tell him I said this, they were not very good. They're really old ones. But as we got further into the gallery, the paintings were incredible. And he had very spiritual paintings. There was the burning bush and Jacob's ladder and paintings of Jesus. And the energy was starting to really amp up the further back we got. And so I looked at Paul and I said, I'm an artist, or I hope people call me that. What advice would you give me? Now remember, he was closing. He had stuff to do, probably. But for 45 minutes, he schooled me on what it meant to be an artist. The wisdom that came out of that man and the joy that was transferred from him to me, talking about how to be an artist, was just incredible. I learned a great deal from that man. I told the whole story in my book, Be Love. But he taught me more about how to be a good human, what it is to be an artist, the responsibility. So anyways, Paul kind of brings this conversation to a close. My little brother and I get in the car. And I look at him as we're pulling out of the laneway and I said, I think we found what we're looking for. He says, yep. But that's the power of creation. There was a creation that was already fully formed, waiting for me. And I had to listen. I had to get quiet. I had to trust that. And that's something that can be incredibly difficult to do. So being creative is much like driving a car. It does all the work for us. When we trust, we allow those creations to move. All the work is done. It's just like driving a car. We just steer. Easy. Another way to exercise practicing our creativity is becoming curious. Curiosity to me, in my book Awakened, I wrote about a bunch of virtues that I felt are really important in life. Now, I put curiosity as a virtue. I don't think if you Googled what are some of the great virtues of life, I don't think curiosity would pop up in that list. But for me, curiosity is a virtue that I live by. It's the catalyst for creativity. When we're curious, to be really curious, we have to suspend our mind and stop saying, I know. Because that's a tendency of the mind. The mind is constantly saying, I know, I know, I know. And it assumes so much. A curious mind assumes nothing, and it wants to know. It's seeking to know more. So curiosity is something that I inspire people. I talk about it with my clients all the time. Become curious. Become curious about everything. Become curious about life. And your life will turn into an adventure. My life's been quite an adventure because of my curiosities and willingness to listen. And one of the ways to play with curiosity, and I find this to be particularly fascinating. When I write, I use bottom to top processing. So most often people, if you're going to write something, you'll start out, you put all the facts. This is what I know. I'm going to put this all on paper and gosh darn it, it's going to look really great. So you put everything you know, and then you start trying to figure out what you don't know. When I write, I quite often, I'll ask myself a question that my mind can't answer. And I just start to write. What arises? I get very quiet and I start writing. So that's a way to play with curiosity. It's a way to play with creativity. It's a practice to become quiet so that you can hear that incredible voice of the silence that resides in you. So tomorrow, I'm going to talk a little bit about balancing the divine feminine and masculine. I'm going to talk about this because balancing these polarities helps create a fertile ground for creativity to rise more naturally. There certainly isn't enough time to dive into this evening, but tomorrow, I promise you in the workshop, there's some really fascinating stuff with this portion of the workshop tomorrow. So tomorrow's workshop is sort of twofold. One about the mind, transcending it, tools that I learned with the Ashram monks. And then the other half is about balancing this so that we create this fertile ground. So living a creative life, it helps us actualize our purpose. Our purpose, and this is something that sort of drove me crazy for a good portion of my life. What is my purpose? And I'd run around and I'd ask anyone that I thought was older than me, wiser than me. Sometimes younger people were a lot wiser than me. But whoever I thought was an elder to me, I would say, what do you think my purpose is? I was fortunate to meet some really enlightened people along my path. I'd ask every person that had any degree of enlightenment, what is my purpose? Can you see it? Can you see that? Remember when I first met Maharishi Krishnanda Shaya, that was the first thing I grilled him with. What is my purpose? He had to know. He's a Maharishi. If the Maharishi doesn't know, who does? But nobody could tell me. But I think living a creative life helps us discover that purpose. How? How does it do that? It helps us discover our purpose because creativity rolls out in your life as a live feed. It's from here to here to here. Every moment of your life, That's how creativity moves. It's from one moment to the next. And so is our purpose. I thought my purpose was that one giant thing, and the clouds were going to part, and God itself would rain down with a thunderous, godlike voice, or maybe it'd sound like Swami G here. And it would say, Ned, your purpose is. But that's not how it works. Your purpose is unfolding from one moment to the next. And creation makes us quiet. If we get into the mode of creation and deeply into the mode of creation, we learn how to be quiet, to listen to what is coming up in us. And then we follow that. And that leads us into our purpose. So practicing creation becomes like a devotion to God. Because where does our purpose come? It certainly can't come from our mind. It was God's will for me. It was the destiny that was sitting in my heart. Or before the little Nedling came down to my mom, that purpose was all in there. So that learning how to access that through creativity has been such a blessing in this journey. Moving creation as a practice, as a devotion to God, it makes the work between you and God. When a creation comes to you, it's really between you and the divine. God brings those creations into us and asks us to move that creation through you so that your purpose can move into this world. So a portion of my relationship with the divine is made up through bringing forward that purpose that God has given to me. And I use creativity to do so. So creativity has this power to reveal all the secrets that are hidden in my heart. Now, if I ask you, do you feel like you have a purpose? Is there anyone here that doesn't feel like they have any purpose at all and they just happen to be here for nothing? No, we all have purpose. And I think one of the most amazing things is when we get to it. And for me, this is my path. This is the journey that I've taken. Krishna Das chants. Thank goodness he does. It's incredible. That's his purpose. He's brought that to us to help us awaken. My journey has been creation and learning how to live a creative life. And, so if that purpose is always rising up in you, I think it's important that you let nothing stand in the way. Let nothing stand in the way of that, and especially the mind. Because that's one of the biggest things that stands in the way from the voice of the silence that speaks in you. So surrender is the key. Got a lot of notes on this one. I better read this. So creativity comes from God, and we must remove ourselves from the finite nature of our minds so that we can, again, hear that voice of God. Surrender. It's such an important component, and it's the one thing that your mind never wants to do. Often people think, when you look at surrender, they think, I've given up. I'm not giving up my mind. I'm not giving up anything in this life. But surrender is a powerful position. It helps me move deeper and deeper into that mode of creation in me. It helps the surrender, helps me move deeper and deeper into the silence. It helps me get lost in it. And everything that you do, if you can get lost in the mode of what you're doing, you surrender yourself fully. It can be, the most mundane things can become beautiful. I remember my mother-in-law once said, is an incredibly beautiful soul. She said, when I wash dishes, and because I hate washing dishes, but when she washes dishes, she allows the water, the warmth of the water to overcome her hands, and she just relaxes into it, and it becomes this beautiful journey of scrubbing dishes. And but she's surrendered. I'm like, yeah, you're surrendering in that moment. So if our purpose rises up in us and it tells us what to do, and it comes from God, what do you do with that? You say yes, of course. We bypass the mind. We say yes, of course. And then if God asks us through our purpose and through moving creation how to do something, and we're surrendered and willing to do it, how do you think we should do that task? Anybody have any ideas? If God said, I want you to do this thing for me, how would you handle that task? I'll give you a hint. Krishna Das talked about it a lot. What did you say? You are 100% right. I love you. Thank you. Love. Love is an incredibly important part of creation. And I wrote a book called Be Love. I like love. Krishna and I kind of click on that. So to honor the creations that we bring forward into this world, because it's an honor, whatever comes up in your creation, it's an absolute honor that the divine chose you. There's millions of people on this earth that are moving creations every day. The divine will choose you for certain things at certain times, and we honor that by loving what we do. The next person that comes up to you and comes into your life, that is a creation. You've called that person's called you. You've both created this scenario. You honor that person with love. Whatever choices or whatever things come into your life, we honor them with love. And by doing so, we mega evolve our creations. Because when we hold love for all that we're creating, we're not edging God out. It's kind of a corny thing. I forget who, there was an author that said, don't edge God out, ego. But it is a really incredible. It's an incredible thing that we do. We edge the divine, we edge God out of the moments in our lives when we're not embracing our lives in the moments with love. In love, like I say, mega evolves. When I think about my favorite art, it's devotional art that has been created with a passion and love. Because when we look at anything that's created with love, it reflects a much stronger image of the divine, because God is love itself. We see God through all that's created. Especially when I look at beautiful art that's been created, like I look at any of these paintings in here, those were created with love. And they reflect God's image. They reflect the image of that God so clearly. And it invokes love in us. It reminds us of our true nature, which is love. So we move the greatest creations into this world with love. In my life, I feel so fortunate and blessed. There is so much love in my life. There's an incredible amount of love in my life. Where I think that comes from is that if we continuously make the choice of love, eventually everything around us is a result of that choice. So again, there's another very important aspect to creating with love, because what we create with love becomes a symbol and a reflection of love itself. And like I was just saying, when other people see that what you have created out of love, it helps them to remember what love is in them. So when creation arises within us, I think it's incredibly important to trust. Trust that. The mind, and I talk to people all the time because I'm a book writer as well. People come up to me and they say, oh gosh, I've always wanted to write a book. I feel like there's a book in me. And I always tell them, trust that. Love the process. So if whatever comes up in you in creation, don't let your mind talk you out of it, because creation comes with divine timing and cosmic accuracy. There is no creation coming to you that is out of time or out of place. So if anything, if you take anything from this talk, I inspire you to trust the creations that are coming up for you, to dig into them. And there's no need to postpone it. When somebody says to me, oh, I want to write a book, but they'll come up with all these ideas and they'll postpone it. Don't postpone the creations that are rising for you. God has given that to you as a divine gift. And everything, like I said before, is already here. When an idea comes to you, it's ready. It's ready to pop. You just have to join in and participate. And the deepest aspect of creation is remove the sense of you, the doer. When you create, remove any sense of self. Look for what God wants to create through you and around you. And you'll start to dive in to some of the most incredible aspects of creation when you just release yourself. There is no you that needs to create. God is doing all of the creating around you, for you, through you. Just play with that. Again, it was a deep honor and pleasure to come and speak with you this evening. Thank you so much.
I am listening to you. The universe is listening to you. To listen is to love. To listen is to care. To listen is to share. You know life really loves you. So open up your heart and share the vibration.